Ancient Greece, the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and drama, a civilization that laid the foundations for the modern world. We know its heroes, its myths, its triumphs. But what about the shadows lurking just beyond the light of history? The truth is, for all we've uncovered about this legendary era, there are mysteries that still leave even the most brilliant scholars scratching their heads. Unexplained phenomena from ancient Greece don't just challenge our understanding, they whisper of secrets lost to time, of technologies and events that seem impossible for their age. Picture this: intricate devices like the Antikythera Mechanism, a 2,000-year-old astrological calculator so advanced it feels out of place in its own time. Or the haunting ruins of the labyrinth at Knossos, where the line between myth and reality blurs into something unsettling. And what of the Oracle of Delphi, whose cryptic prophecies swayed kings and empires? Was it divine inspiration or something far stranger? These aren't just curiosities, they're puzzles waiting to be solved, threads leading us deeper into the unknown. Today, we're setting out on a journey through 30 of the most baffling enigmas from ancient Greece, each one more mesmerizing than the last. From vanished cities to artifacts that defy explanation, we'll explore the edges of history where logic falters and wonder takes over. So if you've ever felt that tug of curiosity, that itch to look beyond the textbooks and into the mysteries that history can't quite explain, you're in the right place. This isn't just a list, it's an investigation into the gaps of our knowledge, a chance to question what we think we know about one of the most influential civilizations to ever exist. Ready to step into the unknown? Let's begin. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, shrouded in mist and mystery, the Oracle of Delphi spoke with a voice that wasn't entirely her own. For centuries, kings, generals, and ordinary pilgrims traveled across the ancient world to seek her guidance, believing her words came straight from Apollo himself. But what really happened in that shadowy chamber beneath the temple, where the Pythia, the priestess of Delphi, sat atop a tripod, breathing in strange vapors before uttering prophecies that would shape empires? The answers are as elusive as the prophecies themselves. Some of history's most pivotal moments hinged on the oracle's riddles. Take Croesus, the fabulously wealthy king of Lydia, who asked whether he should wage war against Persia. The oracle famously replied, "If you cross the river Halys, a great empire will fall." Confident, Croesus marched, only to realize too late that the doomed empire was his own. Then there was Alexander the Great, who visited Delphi early in his campaign. When the Pythia refused to give him an audience, he reportedly dragged her from the inner sanctum by her hair, demanding a prophecy. She gasped, "You are invincible, my son." Whether through fear or divine insight, she was right. Alexander's conquests reshaped the world. But how much of this was divine inspiration and how much was something else? Modern research suggests that beneath the temple ran geological faults, releasing ethylene gas, a substance known to induce trance-like states. Could the Pythia's visions have been hallucinations, her prophecies the result of an altered mind rather than Apollo's whispers? Yet that doesn't fully explain the eerie precision of some predictions. Skeptics argue that the priests of Delphi were masters of cold reading, crafting vague pronouncements that could be interpreted in multiple ways. But if that were the case, how did so many of these prophecies strike with such unnerving accuracy? Perhaps the most unsettling question isn't whether the oracle was right, but why so many powerful figures, from Spartan kings to Athenian statesmen, believed she was. In a world where the line between the divine and the political was razor thin, her words carried weight because they tapped into something deeper, the human longing for certainty in an uncertain world. Even now, as we sift through the ruins of Delphi, the enigma lingers. Was this the work of gods, geology, or something far more mysterious? Beneath the turquoise waters off the coast of the tiny Greek island of Antikythera, a shipwreck from the 1st century before the Common Era held a secret that would rewrite history. In 1901, sponge divers stumbled upon a corroded lump of bronze among the wreckage, a discovery so baffling it would take over a century to fully comprehend. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, an intricate device of interlocking gears so advanced that nothing like it would appear again for over 1,000 years. At first glance, it resembled a clockwork relic, but as researchers painstakingly reconstructed its fragments using modern imaging technology, the truth emerged. This was an ancient astronomical calculator capable of predicting solar eclipses, tracking the cycles of the moon, and even modeling the irregular orbits of known planets with staggering precision. Its gear trains formed a miniature cosmos, a mechanical universe that mirrored the heavens with mathematical elegance. One scholar described it as finding a steam engine in the tomb of King Tut, a technological leap so jarring it seemed to defy the timeline of human innovation. The question of who crafted this marvel still sparks fierce debate. Some attribute it to the legendary workshop of Archimedes in Syracuse, where ancient texts describe celestial spheres that moved like living heavens. Others point to Rhodes, home to famed astronomers like Hipparchus, whose theories of lunar motion align eerily with the mechanism's functions. But perhaps the most haunting detail is the absence of any intermediate prototypes, no simpler versions, no trial models. The Antikythera Mechanism appears in the archaeological record fully formed, as if its creators possessed knowledge that later centuries would forget. What purpose did it serve? Theories range from the practical to the profound. Navigators might have used it to calculate safe passages across treacherous seas, aligning voyages with favorable stars. Philosophers could have employed it as a teaching tool, demonstrating the harmony of celestial mechanics. But the most tantalizing possibility lies in its potential ritual use, a device bridging science and myth, meant to predict eclipses not just as astronomical events but as sacred omens. The greatest mystery isn't how it worked, but why such brilliance vanished. After the Antikythera Mechanism, similar complexity wouldn't re-emerge until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe. Was its knowledge lost in the collapse of ancient civilizations, destroyed as heresy, or simply buried by time? Today, as scientists continue decoding its secrets, this 2,000-year-old computer stands as a ghost of forgotten genius, whispering that the ancient world might have been far more sophisticated than we ever imagined. Of all the mysteries whispered from antiquity, none has captured imaginations quite like the lost city of Atlantis. We owe its legend to Plato, who described it in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, around 360 before the Common Era, not as myth, but as a cautionary tale of a civilization swallowed by the sea. But here's the twist. Plato claimed the story came from his ancestor Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests. Was this elaborate fiction, or could Atlantis have been a real place, its memory preserved in fragments across the Mediterranean? The most compelling theory traces Atlantis to the volcanic island of Thera, modern-day Santorini. Around 1600 before the Common Era, Thera erupted with cataclysmic force, triggering tsunamis that may have crippled the advanced Minoan civilization on Crete, just 70 miles away. The parallels are striking. Plato's Atlantis was a maritime power with sophisticated architecture, annihilated in a single day and night. Thera's ruins reveal multi-story buildings, intricate frescoes, and a network of trade routes, echoes of the empire Plato described. Even the geography fits. Thera's concentric rings of land and water mirror Atlantis's legendary design. Yet skeptics argue Plato fabricated Atlantis as pure allegory, a warning against hubris. His dialogues frame it as a rival to Athens, a decadent society punished by the gods, a trope common in Greek morality tales. If Atlantis was real, why did no other ancient historian mention it? Some scholars propose a middle ground, that Plato grafted his parable onto half-remembered disasters, like the collapse of the Bronze Age sea peoples or even flooding in the Black Sea basin. The mystery deepens with fringe theories. Could Atlantis have been Tartessos in southern Spain, a wealthy kingdom that vanished without trace? Or was it a distorted memory of the Neuragic civilization in Sardinia, whose megalithic ruins still puzzle archaeologists? The truth may lie in Plato's own words. He placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar, but also described it as accessible to Athenian ships, a contradiction that fuels debate. What endures is the allure of the unknown. Whether metaphor or lost reality, Atlantis forces us to question how much of history is buried beneath the waves and how quickly even the mightiest civilizations can vanish. Santorini's ash-covered streets stand as a silent testament. Sometimes the line between legend and disaster is thinner than we think. For nearly 2,000 years, the most powerful men and women of the ancient world, philosophers like Plato, emperors like Hadrian, even playwrights like Sophocles, made a pilgrimage to a small town outside Athens. They came for the Eleusinian Mysteries, a secret initiation so profound that revealing its rites was punishable by death. What transpired in that sacred hall remains one of history's most tantalizing enigmas, a ritual that blended myth, hallucination, and possibly even mind-altering substances to create an experience so transformative that initiates claimed it erased their fear of dying. At the heart of the mystery lay the myth of Demeter and Persephone. According to the story, Demeter's daughter Persephone was abducted by Hades, plunging the goddess of harvest into such grief that the earth itself withered. When Persephone was allowed to return for part of each year, Demeter's joy restored life to the land, a cycle mirroring the seasons. But the mysteries promised more than just a retelling of this tale. Participants underwent a days-long procession from Athens to Eleusis, fasting, cleansing themselves in the sea, and sacrificing pigs before entering the Telesterion, a vast hall where the final rites unfolded in pitch darkness. The key to the experience may have been kykeon, a ritual drink made of barley and pennyroyal. Modern researchers, including ethnobotanist Gordon Wasson, proposed that the barley was infected with ergot, a fungus containing lysergic acid, the same compound that gives LSD its psychedelic properties. Initiates described visions of blazing light, encounters with deities, and an overwhelming sense of unity with the cosmos. Could this have been the work of ergot-induced hallucinations? Ancient texts hint at symptoms matching psychedelic experiences: trembling, nausea, and finally, transcendent revelation. Yet the secrecy surrounding the rites complicates the picture. Those who underwent the initiation, known as epopty, left no written accounts, and archaeological evidence is sparse. The few whispers that survive suggest a dramatic reenactment of Persephone's descent and return, with initiates handling sacred objects in the dark, perhaps a symbolic journey through death and rebirth. The philosopher Cicero, himself an initiate, wrote that the rites taught humanity not only how to live joyfully but also how to die with hope. What makes the Eleusinian Mysteries so fascinating isn't just their psychedelic possibilities, but their cultural endurance. For centuries, the ritual remained unchanged, a rare constant in a turbulent world. Was this the ancient world's best-kept secret because it offered genuine spiritual transformation, or because its mind-bending properties gave initiates an otherworldly certainty of life beyond death? Even as Christianity rose and the mysteries were stamped out in the 4th century, their influence lingered. Some scholars argue that early Christian baptismal rites borrowed elements from Eleusis, repurposing the symbolism of death and renewal. The truth may lie in the duality of the experience, part theater, part pharmacology, all wrapped in the irresistible allure of the forbidden. Whether through divine revelation or chemically unlocked vision, the initiates of Eleusis emerged convinced they'd touched the divine, and that perhaps is the greatest mystery of all. Deep in the heart of Crete, where the sun-baked stones of Knossos whisper secrets of a forgotten age, lies the origin of one of antiquity's most enduring nightmares, the Minotaur's labyrinth. This half-man, half-bull monster, imprisoned in a maze so complex no one could escape, has haunted imaginations for millennia. But was the labyrinth just a chilling myth, or did it have roots in something far more tangible? The answer might lie buried in the ruins of the sprawling Minoan palace at Knossos, where frescoes of bull-leaping athletes and twisting corridors blur the line between legend and reality. The myth itself is deceptively simple. King Minos of Crete, after offending the gods, was cursed with a wife who bore a monstrous child, the Minotaur. To hide his shame, Minos commissioned the genius Daedalus to build an inescapable labyrinth beneath the palace. Every 9 years, Athens sent 7 youths and 7 maidens as tribute, doomed to wander the maze until the Minotaur found them. It's a grisly tale, but the details hint at something deeper. Bulls held sacred status in Minoan culture, symbolizing both power and divine connection. The ritual of bull leaping, depicted vividly in Knossos' frescoes, wasn't just sport, it was a dance with death, a test of courage and skill that mirrored the myth's deadly stakes. When archaeologist Arthur Evans uncovered Knossos in the early 20th century, he found a palace so vast and chaotic it seemed designed to disorient. Multi-level corridors doubled back on themselves, storerooms lay hidden behind false walls, and central courtyards opened like sudden clearings in a forest of stone. To Evans, this was the labyrinth, not a literal maze, but a sprawling architectural puzzle meant to awe and intimidate. Others argue the labyrinth was purely symbolic, a metaphor for the political power of the Minoan elite. Controlling access to knowledge, food stores, and sacred spaces would have reinforced their dominance, turning the palace itself into a living riddle. But the most provocative clue comes from an unlikely source: the land itself. Beneath Knossos, natural cave systems wind through the limestone like veins, some leading to underground shrines where bull horns and offerings have been found. Could these caves have inspired the labyrinth myth? Ancient visitors, stumbling through the dark, might have conflated the twisting passages with the palace above, weaving a story to explain the unseen terrors lurking below. The Minotaur's legacy endures because it taps into a primal fear, the dread of being lost, of facing the monstrous within. Whether as architecture, allegory, or amalgam of both, the labyrinth remains a testament to the Minoan's ability to blur reality and myth. And perhaps that's the greatest mystery of all, not whether the labyrinth existed, but why we're still so desperate to find it. In the hushed halls of Heraclean Archaeological Museum, one artifact stands apart, not for its gold or grandeur, but for the silence it imposes on scholars. The Phaistos disc, a palm-sized circle of baked clay stamped with 45 distinct symbols spiraling inward like a hypnotic whirlpool, has defied translation for over a century. Unearthed in 1908 amid the ruins of Crete's Phaistos Palace, its tiny hieroglyphs, men running, birds mid-flight, shields, flowers appear meticulously pressed into the clay with stamps, making it the oldest known example of movable type in human history. Yet this technological marvel only deepens the mystery. Why would such an advanced method produce a message no one can read? Deciphering the disc has become a graveyard for linguistic ambitions. Early researchers assumed it matched Linear A, the undeciphered script of the Minoans, but the symbols share no clear overlap. Others proposed links to ancient Anatolian or even Semitic languages, yet none yielded coherent translations. The most persistent theory suggests the disc script is a religious cipher, with symbols representing syllabic sounds of a lost liturgical language. But without a bilingual text, a Rosetta Stone, for the Minoan world, every attempt collapses into speculation. Even the disc's authenticity has been questioned. Skeptics note its solitary discovery, with no similar artifacts found in Crete or beyond. Could it be an elaborate hoax? Laboratory tests confirm its age matches the Minoan period, yet the absence of parallels still gnaws at credibility. The symbols themselves offer tantalizing dead ends. Some, like the plumed head, appear uniquely Minoan, while others resemble hieroglyphs from Mesopotamia or Egypt. This has fueled theories that the disc was a diplomatic gift, a traveler's souvenir, or even an ancient board game, though its heat-fired clay suggests careful preservation. The spiral arrangement implies the text was meant to be read from rim to center, but whether it's a hymn, a treaty, or a royal decree remains locked in the symbols. What truly unsettles archaeologists isn't just the disc's opacity, but the implications of its craftsmanship. The precision of its stamped symbols implies the existence of a standardized writing system, yet no other stamped texts from this era have ever surfaced. If the Minoans had movable type, why did the technology vanish for millennia? The disc dangles before us like a key to a door we can't find, proof that Bronze Age Crete might have been far more innovative than we imagined, and a reminder that some secrets resist even the brightest minds. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the Phaistos disc isn't about failure, but about time's selective memory. Civilizations rise and fall, taking with them languages, technologies, and stories we'll never recover. The disc endures as a silent challenge, daring us to reconsider how much of history is still waiting to be spoken. Standing taller than the Statue of Liberty, the Colossus of Rhodes was a marvel of bronze and ambition, a towering tribute to the sun god Helios that guarded the harbor of this ancient Greek city. Built in 280 before the Common Era to celebrate Rhodes' victory over invading Cypriot forces, the statue took 12 painstaking years to complete, its iron and stone framework cloaked in gleaming bronze plates that caught the Mediterranean sun. For 56 years, ships arriving at Rhodes passed between its legs, or so legend claims, until a devastating earthquake in 226 before the Common Era sent the Colossus crashing to the ground. The irony of its destruction lies in the details. The earthquake snapped the statue at its knees, toppling it in what must have been a cataclysmic spectacle. Yet even in ruin, the Colossus commanded awe. Ancient texts describe how the fallen giant remained a tourist attraction for centuries, its massive fingers alone too large for most men to wrap their arms around. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder noted that few could even grasp its thumb. But here's where the mystery thickens. By the 7th century of the Common Era, every trace of the Colossus had vanished. Not a single fragment of its bronze skin, not one block of its marble base, has ever been definitively identified, despite Rhodes being one of the most excavated islands in the Aegean. Where did it all go? The likeliest culprit is the Arab general Muawiyah, who conquered Rhodes in 653. Historical accounts claim he dismantled the remains and sold them to a Jewish merchant from Syria who needed 900 camels to haul the bronze scrap away. But skeptics point out that bronze was far too valuable to leave no record of its reuse. Could the metal have been melted down for weapons or coins, its origin deliberately erased? Or was the story of the camels a myth to explain an even stranger truth, that the Colossus was never at the harbor to begin with? Modern reconstructions only deepen the debate. In 2015, a team of architects proposed a bold new design for a rebuilt Colossus, this time as a shimmering, solar-powered monument 5 times the original's height. Their plans placed it firmly inland, arguing that the harbor location was impossible. Ancient engineering couldn't have supported such a straddling pose without collapsing. But without physical evidence, even this theory remains speculative. The Colossus endures as a ghost of antiquity, its absence as compelling as its presence once was. Perhaps its greatest lesson is how easily even the mightiest wonders can slip through the cracks of history, leaving behind only stories and a haunting question. If something so colossal can vanish without a trace, what else have we lost? Imagine a weapon so terrifying it could set the sea itself ablaze, a liquid fire that clung to ships and flesh alike, defying water to burn with unquenchable fury. This wasn't myth, this was Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire's most closely guarded secret and the ultimate naval weapon of the medieval world. First unleashed in the 7th century of the Common Era, its exact composition remains one of history's most stubborn mysteries, lost not to time but to deliberate obfuscation. The emperors of Byzantium so feared its potential in enemy hands that they carried the formula to their graves, leaving modern chemists and historians to sift through ashes for answers. The legend of Greek fire begins with desperation. As Arab fleets besieged Constantinople in 673, Emperor Constantine IV turned to a shadowy inventor traditionally credited as Callinicus of Heliopolis, who presented him with a substance that could be sprayed from bronze tubes mounted on ships. The effect was apocalyptic. Flames leaped across the water, consuming entire fleets as sailors jumped overboard to escape the inferno. Unlike ordinary fire, this hellish concoction couldn't be doused with water. Some accounts claim it burned fiercer when wet, suggesting a chemical reaction modern scholars still struggle to replicate. What made Greek fire so devastating wasn't just its flammability, but its delivery. Byzantine Droman warships were fitted with pressurized siphons that could arc streams of liquid fire over distances, turning naval warfare into a spectacle of horror. One eyewitness described it as a roaring dragon of flame, its mere appearance enough to send enemy crews into panic. The psychological impact was as potent as the physical destruction. For centuries, the mere rumor of Greek fire in the Byzantine arsenal was enough to deter invasions. The secret of its recipe was guarded with near religious fervor. Emperors decreed that only the ruling family and a select few chemists could know the formula, passing it orally rather than risking written records. When asked how to counter the weapon, one emperor reportedly sneered, "Ask the sea." Modern efforts to reverse engineer Greek fire point to a volatile cocktail of crude petroleum distilled from surface wells around the Black Sea, mixed with quicklime to ignite on contact with water, and possibly sulfur or saltpeter for adhesion. Some theories suggest pine resin or naphtha thickened the mixture, allowing it to cling to targets like medieval napalm. Yet every attempted reconstruction falls short of the historical descriptions. Byzantine texts mention additives like processed light or liquid sunlight, poetic terms that could refer to distilled hydrocarbons or even early forms of phosphorus. The truth may have been deliberately obscured. Emperors likely spread disinformation to protect the secret, leaving contradictory clues in their wake. By the time Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453, the knowledge had vanished so completely that not even the victors could replicate it. The enduring enigma of Greek fire isn't just about chemistry, it's about power. In an age before gunpowder, controlling such a weapon was akin to holding a nuclear secret. Its loss reminds us how fragile technological supremacy can be, and how easily brilliance can be erased by war, time, or sheer human secrecy. Perhaps the greatest lesson lies in the irony. The very measures taken to protect the formula ensured its extinction, leaving us to wonder whether some secrets are meant to stay buried. While Delphi's oracle communed with Apollo through vapors and trance, another sacred site pulsed with an equally uncanny energy, Dodona, where Zeus himself was said to speak through the whispers of an ancient oak. Nestled in the rugged mountains of Epirus, this lesser-known sanctuary operated in stark contrast to Delphi's theatrical grandeur. Here, no priestess gasped prophecies in a smoke-filled chamber. Instead, the divine will revealed itself through nature's own voice, the rustling of leaves, the clang of bronze resonating in the wind, and the eerie creaks of a sacred tree that seemed to articulate the god's command. The rituals at Dodona were as enigmatic as they were humble. Pilgrims would bring questions scratched on thin lead tablets, many of which survive today, ranging from personal dilemmas to matters of state. Priests known as Seloi, who slept on the ground and never washed their feet as a sign of purity, interpreted the oak's murmurs alongside the rhythmic strikes of hanging bronze gongs. The combination created an otherworldly soundscape, as if the very air carried Zeus's voice. Some tablets even record direct answers from the god, suggesting the priests refined the oak's ambiguous sounds into coherent guidance. But how much of this was divine inspiration, and how much was clever theatrics? Archaeological excavations revealed Dodona's open-air sanctuary was perfectly positioned to harness natural acoustics. The temple complex lay in a wind-swept valley where breezes funneled between mountains, creating constant movement in the oak's branches. Recent studies proposed that the bronze gongs weren't just ceremonial. They amplified specific frequencies, turning gusts into harmonic vibrations that might have mimicked speech. Even more intriguing are traces of underground channels found near the sacred tree, sparking theories of hidden water sources or concealed speaking tubes that could have manipulated sound. Was this ancient Greece's earliest known attempt at audio engineering, or simply the serendipity of geography? Dodona's decline mirrors the unraveling of a mystery. As Delphi rose to prominence, backed by the political might of Athens, the quieter oracle faded into obscurity. The sacred oak was felled by Roman invaders in the 4th century before the Common Era, a symbolic death for a site that had thrived for nearly 2 millennia. Yet its legacy lingers in questions about how humanity interprets the natural world. Was Dodona's power purely psychological, a place where wind and wishful thinking merged, or did the priests possess a lost understanding of nature's hidden voices? Unlike Delphi's intoxicating vapors, Dodona's magic required no altered states, just a willingness to listen closely to the world's oldest language, the whisper of leaves and the music of metal singing in the wind. In the dead of night, cloaked in shadows and armed with daggers, Spartan boys as young as 18 slipped through the countryside on a mission that blurred the line between ritual and atrocity. This was the Crypteia, a secretive rite of passage where elite Spartan youths were sent to hunt and kill helots, the enslaved population that outnumbered their masters 10 to 1. Described by Plutarch as a brutal graduation exam, the Crypteia wasn't just about proving combat skills. It was psychological warfare designed to terrorize the helots into submission while forging Spartans into ruthless warriors. But how much of this chilling tradition was reality, and how much was crafted by Sparta's enemies to paint them as monsters? The mechanics of the Crypteia were as methodical as they were merciless. Selected youths were dispatched annually, likely during the autumn harvest when helots worked late in the fields. Their targets weren't random. They sought the strongest, most capable helots, eliminating potential leaders who might inspire rebellion. Ancient sources claim the killings had to be done stealthily. If a Crypteia member was caught, he faced disgrace. This wasn't just murder, it was a calculated display of dominance, a way to remind the helots that even their most capable could vanish without warning. Some historians argue the Crypteia doubled as training for asymmetric warfare, teaching Spartans to operate behind enemy lines long before special forces existed. Yet the truth may be murkier than the legends suggest. Athens, Sparta's rival, had every reason to exaggerate the Crypteia's brutality. Surviving accounts come from critics like Plato, who called it a disgrace to all Greece, and Aristotle, who linked it to Sparta's eventual decline. Even Plutarch's detailed description was written centuries after the fact. Archaeological evidence is scant, no mass graves or inscriptions corroborate the scale of the killings. Some scholars propose the Crypteia was more symbolic than systematic, a ritualized show of force rather than sustained slaughter. Others point to Sparta's infamous secrecy. If state-sanctioned murder occurred, why would they leave records? The psychological impact, however, is undeniable. For the helots, the Crypteia was a constant specter of violence, a reminder that their lives hung on Spartan whims. For the young Spartans, it instilled a chilling lesson. Compassion was weakness and brutality was duty. This wasn't just about culling threats, it was about severing empathy, ensuring the next generation of warriors saw helots as less than human. Modern parallels emerge in extremist indoctrination, where violence is used to harden recruits. The Crypteia's legacy isn't just in the bodies left in the fields, but in the minds it warped. What makes the cryptaya so unsettling isn't just its cruelty, but what it reveals about Sparta's paradox. Here was a society that prized discipline and equality among its citizens, yet relied on systemic terror to maintain it. The same culture that produced philosophers like Lycurgus also engineered a rite that turned adolescence into assassination. Whether myth or reality, the cryptaya forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Even history's most admired civilizations were built on foundations just as dark as they were dazzling. Heracles' first labor was a trial no mortal should have survived, to hunt and kill the Nemean lion, a beast whose golden fur repelled every weapon, claws sharp enough to slice through stone, and a roar that shook the mountains. Ancient poets described it as a creature born of the moon itself, spawned from the twisted union of the serpentine Echidna and the monstrous Typhon. But behind the myth lies a startling truth. Greece was once home to real lions, their bones scattered in caves from the Peloponnese to Macedonia. Could the Nemean lion have been the last of a dying breed, its legend inflated over centuries into something supernatural? Fossil records tell a story modern imaginations might overlook. Cave lion remains dating back to the Pleistocene epoch nearly 12,000 years ago have been unearthed near Nemea, some showing signs of butchering by early humans. These weren't the African lions we know today, but Panthera spelaea, a massive subspecies that stood nearly 4 feet at the shoulder. By the Bronze Age, habitat loss and hunting had pushed them to extinction in mainland Greece, leaving only fragmented memories behind. But memories have a way of growing taller with time. Imagine a Greek shepherd stumbling upon one of the last surviving lions, its size magnified by fear, its hide toughened by scars from failed spear strikes. Over generations, the encounter could easily morph into a tale of an invulnerable monster, demanding a demigod's strength to defeat. Yet the myth's persistence speaks to something deeper than misremembered wildlife. The Nemean lion wasn't just a physical threat, it embodied existential dread. Heracles' struggle mirrored universal human anxieties, facing the unconquerable, proving worth through suffering, and transforming trauma into triumph. The lion's impervious hide forced Heracles to abandon conventional weapons, using his bare hands to strangle it before skinning it with its own claws. This wasn't just a victory, it was a lesson in adaptability, a metaphor for overcoming life's impossible challenges by outthinking them. Even the lion's pelt, which Heracles wore as armor, became a symbol of resilience, protection forged from the very thing that once seemed indestructible. The allegory extends to the lion's divine parentage. As offspring of Typhon, the chaos serpent who battled Zeus, the creature represented primordial forces of disorder. Heracles' triumph wasn't merely a feat of strength, but a reassertion of cosmic order. Later interpretations took on political tones. Some scholars argue the labors allegorized Mycenaean kings suppressing regional threats, with the Nemean lion symbolizing rebellious territories. Others see echoes of initiation rites, where young warriors faced ritualized dangers to earn their place in society. What makes the Nemean lion so compelling isn't just the question of its origins, but why the story refused to fade. Across pottery, mosaics, and texts, its image endured as a reminder that some battles demand more than brute force. They require ingenuity, endurance, and the courage to confront the unimaginable. Whether as fossil or symbol, the lion's legacy lingers, a testament to humanity's need to transform fear into narrative and monsters into meaning. One moment, Helice stood as a thriving coastal city, its wealth built on trade and its reputation as a sacred center of Poseidon worship. The next, it vanished beneath the waves without warning, swallowed whole by the sea in the dead of winter, 373 before the Common Era. Ancient writers describe the catastrophe in chilling detail. Earthquakes shattered the ground, tsunamis surged inland, and by morning, not a single building remained above water. Survivors claimed the gods themselves had punished Helice for defying Poseidon, dragging it into the depths as retribution for denying his sanctuary to neighboring refugees. For centuries, Helike became a cautionary tale, a real-life Atlantis whispered about but never found until modern technology finally unearthed what superstition had obscured. The clues lay buried beneath layers of silt and folklore. Ancient texts placed Helike near the Corinthian Gulf, but early archaeologists dismissed the accounts as legend. Then, in the late 1980s, a team led by Greek archaeologist Dora Katsanopoula began searching where the land meets the sea, using ground-penetrating radar to map submerged ruins. What they uncovered was startling: collapsed walls, pottery shards, and even a possible temple foundation, all lying 30 feet underwater, encased in sediment that preserved them like a time capsule. The evidence pointed to liquefaction, a phenomenon where seismic activity turns solid ground into quicksand, explaining how an entire city could sink so rapidly. Helike's fate wasn't supernatural, it was tectonic. The region sits atop the deadly intersection of the Eurasian and Aegean plates, where friction builds until the Earth releases its tension in violent bursts. Modern seismologists estimate the disaster was a magnitude 6.5 or higher, triggering not just the city's collapse but a tsunami that drowned survivors attempting to flee. The parallels to Plato's Atlantis are uncanny. Both were wealthy maritime powers obliterated by the sea in a single night. Some scholars speculate Helike's destruction, occurring just a generation before Plato wrote his dialogues, may have directly inspired the Atlantis myth, a cautionary tale repurposed for philosophical ends. Rediscovery took so long because the coastline changed drastically over millennia. Rivers deposited silt, pushing the shoreline seaward and burying Helike deeper under farmland. Local fishermen long spoke of seeing shadows of buildings beneath the waves, but their stories were dismissed until technology caught up with tradition. Today, the ruins offer a window into Bronze Age urban planning, with artifacts suggesting a cosmopolitan hub trading as far as Egypt and Asia Minor. Yet the most haunting find isn't a treasure or weapon, it's the absence of human remains. Unlike Pompeii, where victims were frozen in ash, Helike's dead were likely swept out to sea, leaving only echoes behind. The lesson of Helike isn't just about geological inevitability, but cultural memory. Its story endured as myth long before science could explain it, a reminder that humanity's oldest tales often hold kernels of truth. As climate change threatens modern coastal cities with rising seas, Helike's ghost whispers a warning: civilizations may flourish, but the Earth always has the final word. Bronze gleamed under the Mediterranean sun as the towering figure of Tolos patrolled Crete's shores, a mechanical sentinel forged by the gods themselves. According to myth, this ancient automaton circled the island 3 times daily, hurling boulders at invading ships and crushing enemies in a scorching embrace, his hollow veins pulsing with ichor, the divine lifeblood of the gods. But Tolos wasn't just a fantastical guardian. His legend raises a tantalizing question. Could the Greeks have imagined such advanced robotics without some glimpse of real mechanical innovation? The answer might lie in the blurred line between Hephaestus' divine workshop and humanity's earliest engineering triumphs. Homer's Iliad describes Tolos with eerie specificity, a bronze giant with a single artery running from neck to ankle, sealed by a bronze nail. This wasn't just poetic whimsy, it mirrored the inner workings of ancient hydraulic systems. Engineers in Alexandria later built automata using steam and water pressure, while Hero of Alexandria's first-century inventions included mechanical birds that sang and temple doors that opened miraculously for worshippers. Even Da Vinci's 15th-century designs for a robotic knight capable of sitting and waving pale in comparison to the complexity implied by Tolos' autonomous patrols. Was the myth a distorted memory of Minoan metallurgical genius? Crete's palaces boasted advanced drainage systems and articulated figurines with movable limbs, proof that the concept of mechanical motion wasn't foreign to them. The most compelling clue comes from Tolos' fatal flaw. When the Argonauts arrived on Crete, the sorceress Medea exploited his single artery, removing the nail to drain his ichor like a battery pulled from a machine. This detail aligns uncannily with ancient surgical knowledge. Veins were believed to carry life force long before Harvey's circulatory discoveries, but it also mirrors the fail-safes of real automata. Heroes' devices relied on precisely calibrated valves that could be killed by removing key components. The parallels are too striking to dismiss as coincidence. Perhaps Talos wasn't pure fiction but an amalgam of lost technologies and observational genius. The Minotaurs, after all, were master metalworkers whose bronze sculptures captured motion in ways that still astonish archaeologists. Could they have built a primitive, humanoid mechanism, not a true automaton, but an articulated statue so advanced it inspired tales of divine creation? Or did traveling merchants bring stories of Persian water clocks or Egyptian temple mechanisms to Greece, weaving them into legend? The mystery deepens when we consider Talos' cultural role. More than a weapon, he symbolized the tension between innovation and control, a mechanical enforcer ensuring Crete's isolation. His destruction by Medea's cunning, not brute force, hints at ancient anxieties about technology outpacing humanity's wisdom. In that sense, Talos endures as more than myth. He's a warning etched in bronze, reminding us that the line between creator and creation has always been thinner than we think. The Mycenaean palaces burned one by one, not in conquest but in abandonment. By 1200 before the Common Era, the civilization that had dominated ancient Greece for centuries lay in ruins, its grand citadels like Mycenae and Turin reduced to skeletal walls. This wasn't a slow decline. It was a societal vanishing act so complete that later Greeks believed the Cyclopes must have built the massive stone structures, unable to imagine their own ancestors capable of such engineering. The collapse of the Mycenaean world remains one of antiquity's greatest puzzles, a disaster that plunged Greece into a 300-year dark age where writing vanished and populations plummeted. What could dismantle an empire so thoroughly? Theories divide into three camps: invasion, geology, and climate. The most cinematic culprit is the so-called Sea Peoples, a shadowy coalition of raiders mentioned in Egyptian records as laying waste to entire civilizations. A Medinet Habu inscription from Pharaoh Ramses III describes them as unstoppable. Coming from the sea in their warships, none could stand before them. Mycenaean coastal settlements show signs of violent destruction, with arrowheads embedded in walls and storage jars shattered mid-use. Yet the Sea Peoples theory crumbles under scrutiny. Why would raiders systematically abandon conquered cities rather than occupy them? The lack of cultural artifacts left behind suggests these weren't settlers, but scavengers capitalizing on collapse rather than causing it. Earthquakes offer a more plausible trigger. The eastern Mediterranean sits atop a tectonic tinderbox, and archaeological layers at Mycenae reveal zigzagging cracks in palace foundations, toppled walls with no signs of fire, and skeletons crushed mid-flight. Geophysicists note the region suffered a cluster of major quakes between 1250 and 1200 before the Common Era, any one of which could have crippled infrastructure. But while quakes explain structural damage, they don't account for the cultural amnesia that followed. Why would tremors erase Linear B, the Mycenaean writing system, from memory? Then there's the climate hypothesis. Core samples from Greek lakebeds tell a grim story. Pollen records show a dramatic shift from olive and grain to drought-resistant shrubs around 1200 before the Common Era. A 3-century megadrought would have shattered the redistributive economy central to Mycenaean power, where palaces stockpiled harvests to trade for bronze and luxury goods. Tablets in Linear B scream of desperation. One from Pylos lists bronze workers receiving half rations. Another begs the gods for rain to fill the cisterns. Yet drought alone fails to explain why the entire eastern Mediterranean crumbled simultaneously, from the Hittites in Anatolia to the Egyptians experiencing famine. The Linear B tablets themselves add another layer of mystery. These clay records, baked hard in palace fires that ironically preserved them, depict a society obsessed with inventory, every chariot wheel, every jar of honey meticulously logged. But they reveal a fatal rigidity. When crisis came, the Mycenaeans kept counting instead of adapting. One tablet from Knossos records 13,000 sheep without a single mention of dwindling pastures. Was their collapse not just physical but cognitive, a failure to imagine solutions outside bureaucratic habit? Perhaps the truth lies in the interplay of all three forces. Earthquakes weakened infrastructure, drought-starved trade networks, and opportunistic raiders picked at the carcass. But the Mycenaeans' greatest vulnerability may have been centrality. Their palaces functioned like overloaded circuit breakers. When they fell, there were no villages resilient enough to keep the lights on. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was the sound of a society forgetting itself. And in that forgetting, we glimpse a warning. Civilizations aren't murdered, they unravel thread by thread until one day no one remembers how to tie the knot. At the entrance to Apollo's sanctuary in Delphi, a single letter loomed over every pilgrim who crossed the threshold, an enigmatic E carved into the temple stone. This wasn't graffiti or some mason's mark. It held a place of honor mounted beside the oracle's most sacred objects, so revered that even Plutarch, the temple's high priest in the 1st century, devoted an entire essay to unraveling its meaning. How could one Greek vowel, a character so simple a child could trace it, become the subject of such profound debate? The answers whispered through the ages reveal a puzzle where philosophy, numerology, and divine symbolism collide. To understand the weight of this solitary E, we must step into the sandals of an ancient visitor. Delphi wasn't just a place of prophecy, it was the spiritual crossroads of Greece where wisdom seekers came to wrestle with life's biggest questions. The E, known as the Epsilon, stood as the temple's first riddle, a silent challenge to those who believed truth could be easily grasped. Plutarch records at least 5 competing interpretations during his time. Some priests claimed it honored the gods with the word I, meaning thou art, a declaration of Apollo's eternal presence. Others argued it represented the number 5, a sacred digit tied to the harmony of the universe, echoing the Pythagorean belief that mathematics underpinned all creation. Then there were the philosophers who saw the epsilon as a key to enlightenment. The Stoics interpreted it as the second vowel in the Greek mantra, gamma nuo, mega theta, iota sigma, alpha upsilon tau omicron nu, know thyself, the temple's most famous maxim. By focusing on this central sound, initiates might penetrate deeper layers of self-awareness, stripping away illusion like layers of an onion. Modern linguists add another twist. In ancient Greek, the epsilon's elongated pronunciation, E, mimicked the ecstatic cries of the Pythia mid-trance, a sonic bridge between human and divine. Could this vowel have been a ritual trigger, a way to prepare visitors for the oracle's disorienting revelations? The most tantalizing theory ties the epsilon to Apollo himself. In some hymns, the god chants E during his epiphanies, linking the letter to his solar radiance. Delphi's E may have been a fragment of a lost hymn, a frozen syllable of worship left to hum in the temple stones. Plutarch, ever the diplomat, refused to settle the debate. Instead, he suggested the letter's power lay in its ambiguity, that truth, like the epsilon, shifts shape depending on the seeker's vision. What makes this mystery endure isn't the search for a single answer, but what it reveals about ancient Greek thought. The E was a mirror, reflecting back the obsessions of each generation that pondered it. For the devout, it confirmed Apollo's permanence. For mathematicians, it encoded cosmic order. For philosophers, it became a meditation on perception itself. Even today, as scholars analyze temple inscriptions and compare them to Near Eastern symbols, the epsilon resists final interpretation. Perhaps that was Delphi's greatest lesson all along. that wisdom begins not with certainty, but with the courage to sit with the unknown. High in the rugged mountains of Arcadia, where the forests grew thick and the boundaries between man and beast blurred, whispers persisted of a cult that could summon the wolf within. At the center of this legend stood King Lycaon, a ruler whose cruelty became the stuff of divine retribution. According to myth, Lycaon tested Zeus' omniscience by serving him a gruesome feast, the flesh of a slaughtered child, perhaps even his own son. The enraged god struck Lycaon down not with a thunderbolt, but with a transformation, warping his body into that of a wolf, his humanity stripped away as fur erupted from his skin and howls replaced his speech. This wasn't just punishment, it was a primal inversion, reducing a king to the very animal whose savagery he'd embodied. Yet the myth of Lycaon wasn't merely cautionary fiction. Arcadia's remote villages clung to traditions far older than Olympus, rituals where young men cloaked themselves in wolf pelts and crossed into the wilds for years at a time, living as outcasts until they symbolically returned to society. Ancient sources like Pausanias described these rites with uneasy fascination, hinting at ceremonies where initiates consumed a mysterious sacrament, possibly a concoction laced with hallucinogenic herbs like belladonna or henbane, known to induce visions of metamorphosis. The line between ritual and reality thinned under the moon's gaze as participants believed they'd gained the wolf's strength and cunning, if only for a night. What made these practices so unsettling was their duality. Unlike modern werewolf tales of cursed victims, Arcadian lycanthropy was often voluntary, a sacred madness embraced to commune with nature's raw power. Some scholars argue these rites were survival strategies, hardening shepherds to protect flocks from actual wolves in a land where predators and humans vied for dominance. Others see echoes of shamanic traditions, where the wolf symbolized a psychopomp guiding souls between worlds. The Arcadians themselves seemed to revel in their reputation. Coinage from the region frequently bore images of men mid-transformation, their faces caught between human and beast. The cult's influence rippled far beyond Greece. Roman writers like Ovid embellished Lycaon's story, weaving it into a broader tapestry of shape-shifting horror. Early Christian authors later demonized these rituals, recasting them as satanic pacts, a smear that cemented the werewolf's place in medieval folklore. Even the term lycanthropy carries Arcadia's legacy, derived from Lycaon himself. Modern parallels emerge in anthropologist reports of similar rites among Siberian tribes or Norse berserkers who donned bare skins to channel animal fury in battle. The truth behind Arcadia's wolf cult may never be fully unearthed, but its legacy lingers in every full moon's whisper. Was this mass delusion, pharmacology, or something more profound, an attempt to touch the untamed self that civilization had buried? Lycaon's curse endures because it speaks to the beast we still fear lives within us, waiting for the right ritual, the right night to howl. When the island of Thera exploded in a volcanic fury around 1600 before the Common Era, it didn't just reshape the Mediterranean, it sent shockwaves through history itself. This wasn't a mere eruption, it was one of the most violent geological events humanity has ever witnessed. A cataclysm so immense its ash obscured the sun from Egypt to China. Thera's caldera collapsed inward with enough force to trigger tsunamis towering over 100 feet, waves that raced across the Aegean to smash into Crete's northern shores, obliterating Minoan ports in an instant. But the devastation didn't stop at coastlines. The eruption's fingerprints appear in the most unexpected places, from biblical plagues to Plato's Atlantis, blurring the line between natural disaster and myth. The scale of Thera's destruction still staggers modern scientists. By comparing the eruption to Indonesia's Krakatoa in 1883, researchers estimate Thera released 4 times the energy of a hydrogen bomb, its roar audible 3,000 miles away. Pumice layers found in deep sea cores reveal the eruption lasted days, perhaps weeks, with pyroclastic flows superheating the ocean into steam explosions. On Santorini itself, entire towns like Akrotiri were flash-preserved under volcanic ash, their frescoes and pottery frozen mid-use of Bronze Age Pompeii without the human remains, suggesting residents might have fled the precursor earthquakes. But Crete, just 70 miles south, bore the brunt of Thera's aftermath. Tsunami deposits on the island's northern coast contain building fragments, marine fossils, and even cattle bones hurled inland by the waves. The Minoans, a seafaring empire reliant on coastal trade hubs, saw their fleet reduced to splinters in hours. Could this have been the death knell for Minoan civilization? Archaeologists once assumed so, but newer evidence paints a subtler picture. Thera's eruption predates the final Minoan decline by several decades, implying the tsunamis were just the first blow. Ashfall crippled agriculture, while the loss of ports disrupted the copper and tin trade vital for bronze production. Then came the opportunistic Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, who exploited the chaos to conquer weakened Minoan cities. Thera didn't kill Crete outright. It set the stage for a slow unraveling where climate, economics, and invasion combined to topple a once unshakable power. The eruption's echoes might resonate even farther afield. Some scholars argue Thera's atmospheric disruption caused the biblical plagues of Egypt, linking the darkness that could be felt to volcanic ash and the Nile's red hue to iron-rich sediment. Others connect the parting of the Red Sea to tsunami drawdown, where receding waters precede a massive wave. These theories remain hotly debated. Egyptian records from the period make no mention of such catastrophes, but the overlap between geological timelines and Exodus narratives is undeniably intriguing. Then there's Atlantis, Plato's description of a maritime empire vanishing in a single day and night, aligns chillingly with Thera's fate. From its concentric city design matching Santorini's pre-eruption shape to the Minoans' advanced plumbing systems mirroring Atlantis's legendary engineering. Even the timing fits. Solon, Plato's source for the tale, visited Egypt around 600 before the Common Era, where priests might have preserved a 1,000-year-old memory of the disaster. Thera's destruction wasn't just local history. It became a cautionary myth about the fragility of even the mightiest civilizations, repurposed by philosophers and priests across millennia. What makes Thera's legacy so profound isn't just the scale of its violence, but how civilizations processed that trauma. Whether as historical turning point or moral allegory, this eruption reminds us that natural disasters don't just reshape landscapes, they echo through cultures, twisting fact into folklore until the two become inseparable. The ash has settled, but the stories still burn. No prophecy in Greek mythology carries the weight of inevitability quite like the one delivered to King Laius of Thebes, that his newborn son would one day kill him and marry his own mother. What follows is the tragic arc of Oedipus, a man who spends his life fleeing this horrific fate, only to run straight into its arms. This wasn't just a story about a cursed individual. It was a chilling exploration of the ancient Greek tension between destiny and free will, a question that still haunts us today. Can we ever truly escape what's written for us? At first glance, Oedipus seems to have every opportunity to avoid his doom. Warned by the same prophecy, Laius orders the infant abandoned on a mountainside, his ankles pierced and bound, a detail that gives Oedipus his name, meaning swollen foot. But this act of desperation sets the tragedy in motion. A shepherd rescues the child, delivering him to the childless king and queen of Corinth, who raise him as their own. Years later, when a drunken man taunts Oedipus about his true parentage, he seeks answers from the Oracle of Delphi, only to receive the same horrifying prophecy. He will kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified, Oedipus flees Corinth, determined to protect the parents he loves. Yet every step he takes toward what he believes is safety pulls him closer to disaster. On the road to Thebes, he quarrels with an arrogant old man, Laius, his biological father, and kills him in a fit of rage, Later, after solving the riddle of the Sphinx and saving Thebes, he marries the widowed queen Jocasta, his birth mother, crowning himself king of a city now doubly cursed. The brilliance of this story lies in its cruel irony. Oedipus isn't a passive victim. He's a man of action, intelligence, and relentless determination to defy the gods. His very attempts to outrun fate demonstrate the qualities that make him a hero: courage, loyalty, quick thinking, yet these traits become the instruments of his undoing. When the truth finally crashes down on him, it's not because the gods intervene, but because Oedipus himself insists on investigating Thebes' plague, peeling back layer after layer of denial until the mirror shows him a truth too grotesque to bear. In his despair, he gouges out his own eyes, a visceral metaphor for the blindness that gripped him all along. This myth forces us to confront an unsettling question. If the gods had already scripted Oedipus' life, were his choices ever truly his own? Greek thought wrestled with this duality. Oracles and prophecies weren't mere predictions, they were declarations of what would be, as immutable as the turning stars. Yet Greek tragedies also celebrated characters who fought against their fates, like Prometheus defying Zeus or Antigone burying her brother against royal decree. The tension wasn't resolved, it was the point. The audience knew Oedipus was doomed from the first line of the play, yet they leaned forward, breath held, hoping this time he might escape. That's the paradox at the heart of Greek fatalism, the illusion of choice within an unyielding cosmic order. Modern psychology gives this ancient story new resonance. The term Oedipus complex, coined by Freud, reflects how we unconsciously replay family dynamics, though Freud's interpretation misses the myth's deeper dread. The terror of realizing our lives might be governed by forces beyond our control. In an era of pandemics, climate crises, and algorithmic determinism, Oedipus' plight feels uncomfortably familiar. How often do our best intentions lead us deeper into the labyrinth? Sophocles' play ends with no easy moral, only shattered lives and a chorus reminding the audience that no mortal can be called happy until they've crossed life's finish line untouched by tragedy. Yet there's a strange catharsis in Oedipus' story, not because it comforts us, but because it stares unflinchingly at the darkest questions. If even a king with every advantage can't outmaneuver destiny, what hope do the rest of us have? Perhaps the answer lies not in fleeing our fates, but in how we meet them eyes wide open, even when the truth burns. Beneath the light of a full moon, the forests of ancient Greece pulsed with drumbeats and the ragged cries of women who no longer recognized themselves. These were the Maenads, the wild followers of Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and liberation. Clad in fawn skins and wreathed with ivy, they danced with such abandon that their hair whipped like serpents, their voices rising in shrieks that carried across the mountains. To witness their frenzy was to see civilization stripped bare, mothers, daughters, and queens transformed into something primal, tearing live animals apart with bare hands, their faces smeared with blood and honey. This was the Dionysian mystery, a ritual so potent it terrified even the gods. But what force could unravel the human mind so completely? The answer might lie at the crossroads of intoxication, devotion, and the rawest corners of psychology. The Maenads' ecstasy wasn't mere drunkenness. Ancient texts describe women who could snap thick tree branches like twigs, lift boulders no man could move, and run for days without fatigue. Some accounts claim they handled fire without burning or nursed venomous snakes that refused to strike. Such feats suggest something beyond alcohol, perhaps a sacrament laced with potent hallucinogens. The ergot fungus, which grows on barley and contains lysergic acid precursors, might have been brewed into the Kykean drink shared in Dionysian rites. Alternatively, the Maenads could have chewed ivy leaves, which contain psychoactive compounds inducing delirium and euphoria. Yet the most chilling theory isn't pharmacological but social. These rites offered women, stifled by Greek patriarchy, a sanctioned space to shed their identities and unleash repressed rage. Rome's brutal crackdown on the Bacchanalia in 186 before the Common Era reveals just how threatening this liberation seemed. When the Senate uncovered secret Dionysian cults operating in Italy, their response was swift and savage. Thousands were arrested, some were executed without trial. The Senate's edict painted the rites as nests of debauchery and conspiracy, where men screamed like women and women murdered like warriors. But Rome's real fear wasn't morality, it was the loss of control. The Bacchanalia inverted the social order. Slaves reveled alongside nobles, and women commanded rituals where men were mere initiates. In a society built on hierarchy, such fluidity was treason. What makes the Dionysian frenzy so haunting isn't its violence, but its duality. The same rituals that terrified authorities also birthed Greek tragedy and comedy, art forms dedicated to exploring humanity's darkest and brightest impulses. Dionysus wasn't just the god of madness, he was the god of transformation, the one who proved that even the most rigid identities could dissolve under the right conditions. The Maenads' howls still echo in our collective psyche, a reminder that beneath the thin veneer of civility, something wilder waits. Among all the military units of the ancient world, none inspire as much fascination or debate as the sacred band of Thebes. This elite fighting force wasn't just renowned for its skill, it was built on a radical foundation, 150 pairs of male lovers, each fighting side by side with their beloved. The logic was as strategic as it was romantic. A soldier fighting to protect his city might retreat under pressure, but one fighting beside his partner. He'd stand his ground to the death, and stand they did for 40 years. This battalion remained undefeated, carving their legend into history with a blend of passion and steel that defied convention. The sacred band's origins trace back to the late 4th century before the Common Era, a time when Thebes sought to break free from Spartan dominance. Plutarch credits the unit's creation to the visionary General Gorgidas, who recognized the untapped potential of emotional bonds on the battlefield. Unlike typical armies where soldiers were interchangeable, the band's pairs were inseparable, their loyalty forged in love and mutual devotion. Their training was brutal, their discipline unmatched, but their true edge lay in something intangible, the refusal to abandon each other no matter the odds. Their greatest triumph came at the Battle of Leuctra in 371 before the Common Era, where they shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility. Facing a larger, more experienced Spartan force, the Theban commander Epaminondas deployed the sacred band as his spearhead, stacking his left flank 50 rows deep, a revolutionary tactic at the time. As the phalanxes clashed, the band's cohesion proved decisive. They didn't just hold the line, they shattered the Spartan right, killing King Cleombrotus and routing his elite guard. The victory sent shockwaves through Greece, proving that the bonds of love could outmatch even the most hardened warriors, yet their story ends in heartbreak. At Chaeronea in 338 before the Common Era, the sacred band faced its final test against Philip of Macedon and his 18-year-old son, Alexander. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, they refused to retreat, standing firm as Philip's phalanx pressed forward. When the dust settled, all 300 lay dead, their bodies intertwined in pairs where they'd fallen. Plutarch recounts how Philip, surveying the carnage, wept at the sight, murmuring, "Perish any man who suspects that these men did anything shameful." The victor's respect spoke volumes. This was no ordinary defeat, but the fall of something extraordinary. The mystery surrounding the sacred band isn't just about their battlefield prowess, but the society that nurtured them. Thebes celebrated same-sex relationships in ways that baffled its neighbors, viewing them as sources of strength rather than scandal. Modern parallels emerge in the warrior bonds of samurai or the buddy systems in elite special forces today, proof that the alchemy of love and combat transcends time. Excavations at Chaeronea in the 19th century uncovered a mass grave with 150 skeletons arranged in rows, many with arms draped over one another. Was this the band's final resting place? The discovery only deepened their legend, turning a military unit into a testament to the unbreakable bonds that defy even death. What lingers isn't just their tragic end, but the questions they force us to ask. Were they unbeatable because love made them fearless, or was their love immortalized because they chose to die together? The sacred band challenges our assumptions about warfare, masculinity, and devotion, leaving behind a legacy as complex as it is enduring. In the end, their greatest victory wasn't on any battlefield. It was proving that the heart, when wielded as courageously as a sword, can rewrite history. At the heart of Delphi's sacred chaos stood a woman draped in contradictions, the Pythia, Apollo's mouthpiece, who delivered divine wisdom while clothed in the garments of a man. This wasn't a mere costume choice, it was a deliberate rupture in the fabric of gender, a ritual transformation that allowed her to straddle the mortal and divine realms. In a society where women were largely excluded from public life, why would the most influential voice in Greece be a woman? And why would she need to adopt masculine trappings to speak truths that shaped empires? The answer lies in the ancient Greek belief that transcendence required breaking boundaries, including those of identity itself. The Pythia's role demanded a duality that unsettled even her contemporaries. Before ascending the tripod where she channeled Apollo, she purified herself in the Castalian spring, a ritual cleansing that mirrored the god's own androgyny. Apollo, though male, inherited Delphi from Gaia and her serpentine guardian Python, deities tied to the Earth's primal feminine power. By dressing the Pythia in a man's chiton and laurel crown, the priests might have been symbolically completing the god's essence, merging masculine and feminine energies to unlock deeper prophecy. Some scholars argue the clothing neutralized her gender, allowing her to serve as a pure vessel, a notion echoed in other Mediterranean traditions where priestesses of Cybele castrated themselves to become genderless conduits for the divine. Yet the Pythia's transformation wasn't just about appeasing Apollo. Greek religion teemed with figures who defied binary categories. Dionysus, often depicted with soft, effeminate features, embodied ecstasy and irrationality, forces as vital as Apollo's logic. The goddess Athena, born from Zeus's skull, rejected motherhood to become a warrior in virginal armor. Even the myth of Tyreus, blinded by the gods but gifted with prophecy after living 7 years as both man and woman, reinforced the idea that wisdom lay beyond gendered limits. The Pythia's attire may have been a practical nod to this theology, a way to signal her departure from the mundane world into a space where duality dissolved. The rituals surrounding her prophecies deepened this ambiguity. After chewing laurel leaves, a plant sacred to Apollo and possibly psychoactive, she inhaled ethylene gases rising from the temple's fissures, entering a state the Greeks called enthousiasmos, the god within. In this liminal space, her voice deepened, her body convulsed, and her words became unintelligible until translated by male priests. Was this performance a carefully staged illusion or genuine possession? The blurring of her identity mirrored the blurring of her consciousness, as if the very act of channeling divinity required surrendering not just her mind but her place in the social order. Modern excavations add another layer. Artifacts near the temple include offerings depicting bearded women and smooth-faced youths, suggesting Delphi nurtured a cult of the in-between. Even the temple's architecture played with duality. Its entrance faced east toward the rising sun, Apollo's domain, while its innermost chamber plunged into the Earth's darkness, Gaia's realm. The Pythia, balanced between these poles, became a living bridge, her male dress not a denial of femininity, but an expansion of it. What makes this ritual so compelling isn't just its strangeness, but its subversion. In a world where women's voices were suppressed, the Pythia's garb granted her authority, letting her wield a power forbidden to others of her sex. Yet her prophecies were still filtered through male priests, a reminder that even transcendence had its limits. The contradiction lingers. To hear the gods, Greece needed a woman, but to trust her, they had to make her something more. In the Pythia's trembling form, we see the price of wisdom and the lengths humanity will go to believe it. 2,300 years after his death, Alexander the Great's body remains as elusive in death as his empire was vast in life. The conqueror who reshaped the ancient world from Greece to India was laid to rest not once, but 3 times, first in Babylon, then in Memphis, finally in Alexandria, each move shrouding his tomb deeper in myth. The last recorded sighting comes from the Roman Emperor Caracalla in the 3rd century, who reportedly left his ring and cloak on Alexander's sarcophagus as tribute. Then silence. The greatest archaeological treasure hunt in history began, a chase that would span continents, topple dynasties, and expose just how far rulers would go to claim even a sliver of Alexander's legacy. The first false lead ignited in 1899, when a French archaeologist uncovered a black granite sarcophagus in Alexandria's Chalalat Gardens. Hailed as Alexander's lost tomb, the discovery made global headlines until inscriptions revealed it belonged to Nectanebo II, a pharaoh who ruled centuries earlier. Undeterred, treasure hunters turned to the Siwa oasis, where Alexander had consulted the Oracle of Zeus and been declared a god's son. A Greek team in the 1990s claimed to find a mysterious structure beneath the temple, but excavations yielded only pottery shards and a media frenzy with no substance. The most tantalizing clue surfaced in 2016, when a marble slab found beneath a Venetian church in Alexandria bore inscriptions referencing Alexander's burial, yet the tomb itself stayed stubbornly out of reach. Politics poisoned the search at every turn. Ptolemy I, Alexander's general who seized Egypt, hijacked the funeral cortege en route to Macedonia, diverting it to Memphis to legitimize his rule. Later Ptolemies moved the body to Alexandria, where Julius Caesar wept before it, and Augustus allegedly broke off the mummy's nose. By the 4th century, Christian bishops likely ordered the tomb's destruction to suppress pagan veneration. But the darkest twist came in 2021, when declassified documents revealed how British archaeologists during World War II actively suppressed findings near Alexandria's old royal quarter, fearing Axis forces would loot any discovery for propaganda. What makes this tomb the holy grail of archaeology isn't just the man, but what he represents. Alexander's corpse was more than remains. It was a political totem, a divine relic, and a battery of legitimacy for whoever possessed it. The Ptolemies used it to prop up their dynasty, the Romans to justify their imperialism, and even Napoleon reportedly muttered, "If I could find his tomb, I would kneel." Modern scholars suspect it lies beneath modern Alexandria's bustling streets or the murky waters of its harbor, swallowed by earthquakes or rising seas. Yet the tomb's absence speaks louder than its presence ever could. Alexander spent his life chasing immortality through conquest, but his true legacy is this endless search, proof that even in death, he commands armies of archaeologists, historians, and dreamers, all still marching to the drumbeat of his vanished glory. On the remote island of Samothrace, where the northern Aegean winds howl through ancient ruins, initiates of a secretive cult once gathered in a torch-lit sanctuary to witness what seemed like divine magic rocks that could move metal without touch. These were the famed magnetic lodestones of the great god's mysteries, natural magnets that became central to one of antiquity's most enigmatic rites. Unlike the more famous Eleusinian Mysteries, Samothrace's ceremonies left few written clues, but tantalizing archaeological finds suggest these stones weren't just props. They were gateways to an early understanding of invisible forces, straddling the line between religion and proto-science. The rituals unfolded in the sanctuary of the great gods, a sprawling complex where nobles and commoners alike sought protection from shipwrecks and divine favor. Ancient accounts describe initiates undergoing a ceremony called the maesis, where they were led blindfolded through a series of trials before witnessing the lodestone's miracles. Iron rings offered as votive gifts would suddenly cling to the rocks in midair, seemingly defying nature. To Bronze Age eyes, this wasn't just fascination, it was proof of the gods' presence, a tangible manifestation of their unseen power. The stone's pull was likened to the force of fate itself, drawing souls toward destiny as inexorably as metal to magnet. But the Samothracians may have grasped more than mere symbolism. The island's position along trade routes exposed its priests to Babylonian and Egyptian knowledge, where lodestones were already noted for their strange properties. By the 4th century before the Common Era, Greek philosophers like Thales were theorizing about magnetism, possibly inspired by Samothrace's rituals. Some scholars argue the cult's secrecy wasn't just about preserving sacred truths, but protecting what amounted to early trade secrets knowledge that could grant naval advantages, like using lodestones to magnetize compass needles long before their widespread medieval use. The stone's dual role as sacred objects and scientific curiosities reflects a broader tension in ancient thought. To the initiates, their power confirmed the gods' intervention. To later thinkers like Lucretius, they became evidence of natural laws. Yet even the pragmatic Romans couldn't resist the mystique. After conquering Samothrace, they transported lodestones to Rome as trophies, marveling at their properties while stripping them of ritual context. Today, excavations at the sanctuary continue to unearth iron-rich hematite fragments, some still clinging to rusted nails after 2 millennia. These silent witnesses hint at a cult that didn't just worship the unseen but harnessed it, blurring the boundary between temple and laboratory. In the dark of the Maisis, as metal leaped toward stone, initiates didn't just witness a trick, they stood at the precipice of a revelation, one where the divine and the natural world were far more entangled than anyone had dared to imagine. For centuries, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey were dismissed as pure myth, elaborate fantasies of gods and heroes with no basis in reality. Then, in the late 19th century, a self-taught archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann set out to prove the skeptics wrong. Armed with little more than Homer's verses as a guide, he began digging into a windswept hill in modern-day Turkey called Hisarlik. What he uncovered would ignite one of history's fiercest academic debates. Were these epic poems historical records dressed in poetic finery, or merely fictions that borrowed scraps of real geography? The evidence at first seemed damning. Schliemann's excavations revealed not just one city buried beneath Hisarlik, but 9 distinct layers of settlement spanning nearly 4,000 years. One of these layers, Troy VII, bore scars of violent destruction. Collapsed walls, arrowheads embedded in streets, and fire-blackened debris dating to around 1250 before the Common Era, eerily close to Homer's estimated timeline for the Trojan War. Even more compelling were the treasures Schliemann dubbed Priam's gold, a hoard of jewelry and weaponry that mirrored descriptions of Mycenaean wealth in the epics. The discovery sent shockwaves through academia until scholars realized Schliemann had a habit of embellishing facts. He'd smuggled artifacts, misdated layers, and even staged photos of his wife wearing Helen's jewels. His reckless methods cast doubt on his findings, but they couldn't erase the tantalizing question. If Troy was real, what about the war itself? The Mycenaean connection deepened the mystery. Homer's descriptions of well-built Mycenae, rich in gold, aligned perfectly with the citadels unearthed by later archaeologists' massive cyclopean walls, gold death masks, and frescoes depicting warriors in boar tusk helmets. Linear B tablets from Pylos and Knossos even referenced names resembling Homeric characters, like a warrior named Achilles and a woman called Hecate. Yet these tablets were bureaucratic records, not battle chronicles, lists of olive oil rations and chariot repairs, not epic duels. Skeptics counter with glaring inconsistencies. Homer's depiction of iron weapons clashes with the Bronze Age's reliance on bronze. His heroic age of individual combat doesn't match the Mycenaeans' reliance on chariot warfare. Most damningly, no contemporary source, Hittite, Egyptian, or otherwise, mentions a decade-long siege of Troy. The Hittite archives do reference a rebellious vassal state called Wilusa, possibly Ilios, another name for Troy, and a conflict over a woman, but these fragments are vague at best. The truth may lie in the oral tradition itself. The epics weren't written down until centuries after the alleged war, passed down through generations of bards who embellished and adapted. Like a game of ancient telephone, historical kernels, a trade dispute over metals, a raid gone wrong could have ballooned into legends of divine interference and world-shaking vengeance. The real Trojan War might have been a minor skirmish magnified by time, its warriors transformed into demigods by poets seeking patronage and prestige. What makes this debate so enduring isn't just the evidence, but what it reveals about human storytelling. Troy's ruins prove civilizations rose and fell as Homer described, even if the details blurred. The Iliad and Odyssey endure not because they're factual, but because they tap into universal truths: the cost of pride, the longing for home, the fragile line between history and the stories we tell to make sense of it. In the end, the question isn't whether the Trojan War happened, but why we so desperately want to believe it did. Sparta's legend looms large, a city-state where every boy was ripped from his mother at 7 to endure the brutal agoge, where men lived in barracks until 30, and weakness was literally thrown off a cliff. This image of relentless discipline has been immortalized in films, books, and even fitness trends like the Spartan race. But peel back the layers of myth and a startling question emerges: how much of this infamous ferocity was real and how much was carefully crafted propaganda? The truth lies somewhere between history's whispers and the exaggerated echoes of later admirers. Start with the agoge, the training program that turned boys into warriors. Yes, it was harsh. Young Spartans endured whippings, slept on reeds, and stole food to survive. But the notion that they only trained for war is a distortion. Recent archaeological evidence reveals Spartan youths also studied music, poetry, and dance, particularly the pirhich, a war dance that blended artistry with combat drills. Even the infamous "throw the weak babies off Mount Taygetos" story crumbles under scrutiny. No mass infant graves have been found, and Spartan records list disabled citizens who clearly weren't culled at birth. Rather than a society of unthinking killers, Sparta cultivated a paradoxical blend of brutality and refinement, where warriors quoted Homer before battle and wives, unlike elsewhere in Greece, owned land and managed estates while their husbands were at war. The real myth-making began with Sparta's greatest enemy, Athens. Athenian writers like Plato and Xenophon, who idolized Sparta's order as a critique of their own democracy, painted it as a utopia of discipline. Then came the Romans, who fetishized Sparta even more. By the time Plutarch wrote his life of Lycurgus centuries later, Sparta had been polished into a moral fable, a warning against decadence, its history scrubbed clean of contradictions. The Romans, after all, saw themselves as spiritual heirs to Spartan toughness, even as they lounged in imperial luxury. Modern media has amplified these distortions. Films like 300 reduce Sparta to a caricature of shirtless abs and shouted slogans, erasing its complex realities, like the fact that Spartans actually wore armor in battle, or that their famed immortals were often supplemented by mercenaries and helot auxiliaries. Even the term Spartan lifestyle ignores how the city's elite dined on black broth, not out of austerity, but because their enslaved helot class cooked, cleaned, and farmed for them. This was less a society of equals than a small warrior caste propped up by systemic oppression. The most enduring legacy of the Spartan mirage isn't historical inaccuracy, it's the dangerous allure of glorifying militarization. From Prussian drill masters to fascist regimes, Sparta's myth has been weaponized to justify everything from child soldier programs to eugenics. Yet the real Sparta was far more fragile than its legend. By the 4th century before the Common Era, population decline and rigid traditions left it a shadow of its former power, unable to adapt as Macedonia rose. The city that obsessed over strength died not in battle but from its own inflexibility. Perhaps the greatest irony is that Sparta's fiercest warriors, the ones who stood at Thermopylae, would barely recognize the fanatical cult that bears their name today. They fought not for glory but for a home that was as flawed and human as any other, a place where art and war, freedom and oppression coexisted in uneasy balance. The Spartan mirage endures not because it's true but because we want it to be, a simple story of toughness triumphing over chaos. But history, like the Spartans themselves, is rarely that straightforward. In the 1st century of the Common Era, a strange rumor spread across the eastern Mediterranean, a divine death notice delivered not by priests or poets but by anonymous sailors. According to Plutarch, a ship bound for Italy was becalmed near the Echinades Islands when a mysterious voice called out to the helmsman, commanding him to announce the great god Pan is dead upon reaching shore. The crew, terrified but obedient, delivered the message, sparking immediate upheaval. How could a deity, especially one as primal and enduring as Pan, the goat-footed god of wild places, simply perish? This wasn't just gossip about a fading cult, it struck at the heart of ancient belief, echoing through history as a harbinger of cosmic change. The timing was unnervingly symbolic. Plutarch placed the incident during the reign of Tiberius, roughly concurrent with another radical spiritual upheaval, the crucifixion of Jesus. Early Christian writers like Eusebius latched onto the story as proof of paganism's collapse before the rising true God. Yet the parallels run deeper than theology. Pan embodied the untamed wilderness, a symbol of nature's indifference to human morality. His alleged death mirrored the Mediterranean's rapid urbanization, where sacred groves fell to olive presses and shepherds' pipes faded beneath the din of Roman forums. If Pan, the very spirit of the uncultivated, could die, it confirmed humanity's growing dominance over a world once thick with gods, but skeptics offer a simpler explanation. The Greek word Pan also means all, leading some scholars to argue the sailors misheard a lament for the mortal passing of Thamus the All-Great, perhaps a local hero or sailor lost at sea. Others suggest a ritual shout from an Egyptian mourning rite for Osiris, whose death and resurrection echoed seasonal cycles. Plutarch himself, a priest at Delphi, had reasons to amplify the tale. His writings often framed pagan decline as natural rather than catastrophic, smoothing Rome's transition toward monotheism. The story's true power lies in its ambiguity. Whether divine obituary or linguistic accident, Pan is dead became a cultural shorthand for irreversible change. Renaissance artists painted it as the moment nature fell silent. Romantic poets like Elizabeth Barrett Browning recast it as a lament for industrialization's assault on the wild. Modern ecologists resurrect the phrase to mourn biodiversity loss, proof that some symbols outlive their gods. The sailor's cry endures not because it was true, but because we keep finding new worlds for it to describe. Deep within the sanctuary of Olympia, where athletes once competed for glory under Zeus' gaze, another marvel burned ceaselessly, an eternal flame in the temple of Hera, flickering untouched by human hands for centuries. While most associate perpetual fires with modern memorials like the tomb of the unknown soldier, the concept stretches back to antiquity, where natural phenomena and priestly ingenuity conspired to create miracles. The flame at Olympia wasn't merely symbolic. It was a geological sleight of hand, harnessing the Earth's hidden energies to inspire awe and devotion. The mechanics behind this ancient wonder reveal a keen understanding of the landscape. Beneath much of Greece lie pockets of natural gas methane seeping through fractures in the bedrock, often igniting when exposed to oxygen. Similar eternal flames burned in modern-day Iraq at the Temple of Baba Gurga and in Turkey's Mount Chimera, where fire has blazed for over 2 millennia. Hera's priests observing these phenomena likely tapped into subterranean gas veins by channeling them through hollow altars or fissures in the temple floor. To worshippers, the flame's endurance wasn't just impressive, it was divine validation, proof of the god's favor manifest in unquenchable fire, but the brilliance lay in the theater. Ancient texts describe ceremonies where priests summoned fire by plunging torches into seemingly ordinary pits, only to withdraw them ablaze. These carefully staged demonstrations mirrored the myth of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods, a narrative the priesthood may have weaponized to reinforce their authority. By controlling access to the flame, they blurred the line between nature and divinity, turning geological luck into sacred spectacle. The Heraean's flame also held practical significance. During the Olympic Games, it served as a beacon, its light guiding runners in the first relay races where torches kindled from the sacred fire were carried to participating city-states. This ritual, echoing the modern Olympic torch tradition, wasn't just pageantry, it was a binding ritual, tethering scattered Greek communities to a shared spiritual hub. What makes Olympia's eternal flame so compelling isn't just its probable scientific explanation, but the cultural alchemy that transformed gas into gospel. Across the ancient world, from Persia to Indonesia, similar flames became focal points of worship, their inexplicable endurance interpreted as portals to the divine. The priests of Hera didn't just harness geology, they weaponized wonder, proving that sometimes the most powerful miracles are those orchestrated by nature and perfected by human cunning. Buried in the ashes of a long-lost Arcadian village, a small ceramic cup lay waiting to rewrite history. At first glance, the 500-year-old skyphos appears ordinary until you tilt it toward the light. Etched into its curved surface is a mesmerizing geometric pattern of interlocking triangles and hexagons so precise, it defies the artistic capabilities of its time. This wasn't just decoration, it was a mathematical puzzle carved in clay, a tessellation so advanced that modern scholars argue it shouldn't exist without knowledge of concepts like hyperbolic geometry, the kind of math that wouldn't be formalized for another 2 millennia. The design's complexity is staggering. Each repeating triangle maintains perfect symmetry across the vessel's curved surface, requiring an understanding of how shapes distort when projected onto rounded forms, a challenge even for today's graphic designers using software. Mathematicians confirm the pattern follows what's now called the Order 7 triangular tiling, a configuration so intricate that reconstructing it freehand would demand either inhuman precision or a systematic grasp of spatial algorithms. Yet here it sits, casually gracing a drinking vessel from a civilization we assume worked with basic arithmetic and ruler and compass constructions. How did ancient Arcadian artisans achieve this? The debate splits scholars into 2 camps. One argues for accidental genius, that through trial and error, a particularly skilled potter stumbled onto this pattern via intuitive symmetry, like a prehistoric Mozart composing by ear. Similar, impossible artifacts exist elsewhere, like the Neolithic carol carvings in Peru that accidentally mirror Fibonacci sequences. But the other camp sees something more deliberate. Fragments of lost knowledge passed down through initiatory craft guilds, techniques later erased by war or time. After all, this was the same era when Pythagoras, who spent decades studying in Egyptian and Babylonian temples, claimed mathematics held divine secrets. Could the skyphos be physical proof of mathematical traditions oral histories never recorded? The mystery deepens when we examine the skyphos' cultural context. Arcadia was considered Greece's rustic heartland, a land of shepherds and simple folk. Yet this cup surfaced near the sanctuary of Lycurgus, home to the enigmatic Despoina cult, whose initiation rites allegedly revealed hidden cosmic truths. Ancient sources describe initiates entering trance states to perceive the geometry of the gods, are just vague enough to fuel speculation. Was the skyphos a ritual object, its pattern encoding esoteric knowledge meant to trigger specific visual or cognitive effects? Modern neuroscience confirms that repeating geometric patterns can induce altered states, a principle harnessed in everything from Byzantine icons to psychedelic therapy. Perhaps most tantalizing is the skyphos' lonely existence. No other Greek artifact from this period displays comparable geometric sophistication. Either its brethren were destroyed or we're witnessing a fleeting spark of brilliance, a single artisan's transcendent moment before the method vanished. Like Antikythera's gears or Phaistos' cryptic disc, the cup stands as both triumph and taunt, proof that history's secrets aren't always buried in gold or stone, but sometimes in plain clay, waiting for us to see beyond our assumptions. High in the rugged slopes of Mount Parnassus, hidden by dense forests and the echoes of goat bells, lies a cavern so vast it could swallow entire villages, the Corycian Cave. Named after the nymph Corycia, lover of the wild god Pan, this labyrinth of limestone chambers stretches nearly 3 miles into the earth, its entrance a yawning mouth draped in ferns and myth. To the ancient Greeks, this wasn't just a geological wonder, it was a sacred nexus where the divine and the subterranean blurred, a place where Pan's flute echoed off stalactites like spectral choirs, and where even the Oracle of Delphi dared not peek too deeply. Archaeologists who have braved the cave's depths have uncovered artifacts that defy easy explanation. Among the most haunting are hundreds of knucklebones animal talismans used in ancient divination, scattered alongside broken pottery and rusted blades. Some bear inscriptions to Pan and the nymphs, pleas for fertility or madness. Others seem to mark boundaries, as if the cave's recesses were partitioned into ritual zones. But the most unsettling finds are the crude clay masks, their features twisted into grotesque screams. Were these offerings to appease chthonic gods or props for initiations into mysteries too dark for daylight? The cave's acoustics amplify whispers into roars, suggesting ceremonies here may have relied on sound to induce trances, a natural theater of terror and transcendence. Yet the cave's secrets weren't only spiritual. During the Persian invasion of 480 before the Common Era, locals fled here to escape the wrath of Xerxes' armies, their makeshift dwellings still visible in the soot-blackened ceilings. Centuries later, Christian hermits repurposed the cavern as a refuge from iconoclasts, carving crosses into the walls as if to sanctify the pagan darkness. But the most persistent legend speaks of a tunnel winding through the mountain's belly, emerging near Delphi's sacred spring. Could priests have used this passage to stage miracles, slipping unseen between sanctuaries to manipulate oracles? Modern surveys confirm the cave's deepest shafts align toward Delphi, though collapses now block any direct route. What lingers isn't just the evidence, but the unease. Visitors still report discordant flute notes in empty chambers, and shepherds swear they've seen shadowy figures dancing at the cave's mouth under a full moon. Science dismisses these as wind and fatigue, but the ancients knew better. Some places refuse to be fully mapped, not because we lack the tools, but because they guard secrets meant to stay wild. The Corycian cave doesn't give up its truths, it whispers them in echoes only the reckless dare follow. Look up at the night sky, and you're not just seeing stars, you're gazing at the same celestial stage where the Greek gods once played out their dramas. Long before telescopes revealed the true nature of the planets, ancient astronomers named these wandering lights after the most powerful Olympians. Zeus' thunderbolts became Jupiter's fiery glow, Aphrodite's radiance was etched into Venus' shimmer, and Ares' bloodlust seeped into Mars' ruddy hue. But here's the cosmic mystery. Were these planetary connections always woven into Greek mythology, or did later cultures like the Romans stitch them together to fit their own beliefs? The answer lies in the shifting skies of history, where astronomy and divinity collided to shape everything from astrology to empire. The Greeks didn't just project their gods onto the planets, they wove the cosmos into their very identity. Homer's Iliad mentions the Star of Aphrodite as a celestial omen, while Hesiod's Theogony describes Zeus placing his father Kronos among the stars, linking sovereignty to the heavens. But the real breakthrough came with the Babylonians, whose meticulous star charts influenced Greek thinkers like Pythagoras and Plato. By the 5th century before the Common Era, Greek astronomers had mapped planetary movements with startling precision, assigning each deity based on traits. Swift-footed Hermes governed Mercury's fleeting orbit, while melancholic Kronos, later conflated with Saturn, ruled the slowest, darkest wanderer. This wasn't arbitrary, it was a celestial mirror of earthly power structures, reinforcing the gods' roles through the immutable laws of the sky. Enter the Romans, who didn't just borrow this system, they weaponized it. When they adopted Greek mythology, they recalibrated the planetary pantheon to reflect their own values. Mars evolved from a feared war god to a symbol of Roman military might, his red planet a beacon for conquest. Jupiter, once Zeus, became the divine guarantor of Rome's eternal rule, his cosmic dominance justifying imperial expansion. Even the days of the week, derived from planetary names, became tools of cultural assimilation. Thursday, Thor's day, was dies Jovis in Latin, cementing Jupiter's reach into daily life. The planets ceased to be mere symbols, they were propaganda written in starlight. Astrology's rise cemented these connections. Hellenistic scholars like Ptolemy didn't just observe the stars, they decoded them as divine messages. In his Tetrabiblos, Venus became shorthand for love and beauty, not because of poetic fancy, but because its bright, steady light mirrored Aphrodite's nurturing influence. Saturn's gloomy distance aligned with Kronos' association with time and decay, birthing the idea of Saturnine melancholy. This wasn't science as we know it, it was a fusion of myth and mathematics where planetary alignments could predict harvests, wars, and dynasties. When a comet flared before Julius Caesar's assassination, Romans saw it as his soul ascending to join Jupiter, proof that the god's celestial signatures were never just metaphor. Yet cracks in this cosmic order began to show. Some Greek philosophers, like the atomist Democritus, argued the planets were mere worlds like our own, devoid of divine essence. The Stoics countered that the stars were living intelligences, their movements a language only the enlightened could read. This tension between gods as celestial bodies versus gods controlling celestial bodies reveals the ancient world's struggle to reconcile faith with observation. Even Ptolemy's geocentric model, which placed Earth at the universe's heart, was less about scientific accuracy than preserving the gods' hierarchical dominion. What makes these astronomical links so enduring isn't their factual accuracy, but their narrative power. From Shakespeare's star-crossed lovers to modern horoscopes, we still frame destiny through planets named for temperamental gods. NASA missions to Mars and Venus carry echoes of Ares and Aphrodite, proving that mythology outlasts even the death of belief. The Greeks may not have invented these connections, but they gave them a story, one where the heavens weren't just a void, but a stage where gods and mortals danced together across time. To ponder these celestial ties is to glimpse how deeply we've always needed the sky to reflect our dreams, fears, and the timeless question: are we the makers of our fate, or merely players in a drama written in the stars? From the prophetic whispers of Delphi to the mechanical genius of the Antikythera device, from the terrifying rituals of the Maenads to the lost labyrinth of Knossos, these 30 mysteries of ancient Greece don't just challenge our understanding of history, they dissolve the boundary between myth and reality. Each one is a thread in an intricate tapestry where gods walk alongside engineers, where nature's fury is indistinguishable from divine wrath, and where the echoes of forgotten voices still murmur through crumbling ruins. What makes Greece's unsolved enigmas so endlessly compelling isn't just their age, it's their refusal to fit neatly into categories. The Oracle of Delphi might have been channeling ethylene vapors, but why did her predictions resonate with uncanny accuracy? The Phaistos disk could be an elaborate hoax, yet its precision hints at knowledge we've yet to recover. And Atlantis, was it Plato's allegory, a distorted memory of Thera's destruction, or something else entirely? These aren't gaps in history, they're doorways, beckoning us to reconsider what we think we know about human ingenuity, belief, and the fragile transmission of knowledge across millennia. Perhaps the real magic of ancient Greece lies in this duality. Here was a civilization that gave us democracy and drama, yet also believed in shape-shifting kings and bronze automata. A culture that mapped the stars with astonishing accuracy, yet saw in those same stars the faces of temperamental gods. The contradictions aren't flaws, they're reminders that progress isn't linear, that brilliance and superstition can coexist, and that some truths are too multifaceted to be pinned down by archaeology or texts alone. Now we turn the question to you: which of these mysteries lingers in your imagination? Is it the tragic inevitability of Oedipus' fate, the eerie precision of Greek fire, or the haunting silence of the Phaistos disk? Share your thoughts in the comments. We're endlessly fascinated by the conversations these ancient riddles inspire. And if you've enjoyed this journey to the edges of history's map, don't forget to subscribe. There are always more enigmas to unravel, more shadows waiting at the fringes of the past. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember, sometimes the greatest truths are hidden not in answers but in the search itself.